Imagine being trapped on a hilltop fortress, starving, surrounded by the most disciplined army on earth, and then realizing the enemy has built not one wall to hold you in, but another wall to keep your rescuers out. Two rings of death. A fortress built around a fortress. And inside, 80,000 Gauls listened to their last food being counted, their last horses being slaughtered, their last hope measured in days. This is Alesia, 52 BCE, Julius Caesar's most audacious siege, Vercingetorix's final gamble, a battlefield where engineering becomes a weapon, where courage becomes arithmetic, and where one decision will decide the fate of Gaul for centuries. The story begins with a rebellion that spreads like wildfire. Gaul is not a single nation, it is a quilt of tribes, rivalries, feuds, and pride. For years, Caesar has exploited that division with the cold patience of a predator. He makes allies, breaks enemies, and turns one tribe against another. He takes hostages, demands tribute, and speaks of peace while his legions build roads that lead straight to conquest. But in 52 BCE, the tribes find a leader who speaks their language of honor and vengeance, a young Arvernian noble with iron in his spine and fire in his voice, Vercingetorix. He does what few have ever managed in Gaul. He unites. He convinces proud chiefs to obey a single command. He turns scattered resistance into organized war. And he understands something essential about Rome. Rome is not just swords and shields. Rome is logistics. Rome is discipline. Rome is an army that eats like a machine and marches like a machine. You cannot beat it by meeting it head-on in a heroic clash and hoping the gods favor your courage. You starve it. You bleed it. You deny it the land itself. So Vercingetorix orders a strategy that chills even his own people. Scorched earth. Villages burned. Grain stores destroyed, fields stripped. Anything that can feed a Roman legion must vanish into smoke. It is a brutal command, because it is war against your own comfort, your own homes, but it is also the first truly strategic attempt to break Caesar's momentum. For a time, it works. Caesar's legions, used to living off the land, begin to feel the bite. Foraging parties meet ambushes, supply lines stretch thin. Roman allies waver, and then comes a shock that echoes across the provinces. At Gergovia, Vercingetorix defeats Caesar. Not a skirmish, not a raid, a real battlefield defeat. Roman soldiers die beneath Gaulish walls, and Caesar is forced to withdraw. It is the kind of moment that can change history. But victory has a price. The Gauls are emboldened, yes, and also divided by success. Some tribes want to press the advantage, others want to protect their own territory. Vercingetorix has united them, but unity is fragile. It is held together by triumph and fear, and both can evaporate. Caesar, meanwhile, does what he always does when the situation turns dangerous. He moves fast. He rallies his scattered forces, calls in cavalry, and seeks a decisive engagement. He cannot afford a long war in Gaul. Back in Rome, politics is a knife fight. His enemies watch for weakness. If he looks vulnerable, they will strike. Caesar needs a victory that ends the rebellion in one blow. And Vercingetorix, after Gergovia, makes a fateful choice. He pulls his army back to a stronghold called Alesia, an oppidum perched on a high plateau in the land of the Mandubii. From the top, the world drops away into valleys and rivers. Steep slopes, natural defenses, a fortress made by nature. It seems like the perfect place to rest, regroup, and wait for a relief army to gather from the tribes. It is also a cage if the enemy is bold enough to lock the door. Caesar arrives and sees the hill. He sees the walls. He sees the Gauls packed inside like a storm cloud ready to burst. And he makes a decision that is either genius or madness. He will not assault the heights. He will bury them. Roman legions spread out across the valleys, taking positions with the precision of craftsmen. The Gauls watched from above, confident that no one can starve them out before help arrives. They have warriors. They have pride. They have the high ground. But Caesar has something else: time, discipline, and the Roman shovel. To understand Alesia, you have to understand that Rome fights with tools as much as weapons. A legionary carries more than a sword. He carries a heavy shield, a helmet, armor, javelins, and he carries what looks like a simple thing, almost an afterthought. A digging tool. Because a Roman army does not just march into danger. It builds safety around itself. Every night, even in enemy territory, it digs trenches and raises ramparts. It turns an open field into a fort. It turns fear into routine. At Alesia, Caesar magnifies that routine into a masterpiece of siegecraft. He orders a line of fortifications to encircle the entire hilltop, a ring, a wall facing inward toward the Gauls. This is circumvallation, a barrier meant to imprison the besieged. It is not a single ditch and a palisade. It is a layered system designed to kill anyone who tries to break through. The work begins at a scale that feels impossible. Miles of trenches carved through earth and stone, ramparts raised from the spoil, wooden palisades crowned with sharpened stakes, towers spaced at intervals so that archers and slingers can rain fire along the line, gates and redoubts positioned to control movement. And then Caesar does something even more astonishing. He orders a second ring, another wall facing outward away from Alesia. This is contravallation, built to defend the Romans from the relief army that everyone knows is coming. Caesar is not just besieging a fortress, he is preparing to be besieged himself. 2 circles, 2 fronts, 2 wars at once. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watches the Roman earthworks grow day by day, like a noose tightening. He knows what it means. If Caesar completes the ring, the Gauls will be trapped. No foraging, no breakout without blood, only waiting and hunger. He tries to disrupt the construction with cavalry sorties. Gaulish horsemen thunder down the slopes, their hair long, their shields painted, their spears leveled. They strike at Roman workers, hoping to tear the fortifications apart before they harden. But the Romans anticipate this. They position troops to cover the laborers. They use their own cavalry, including Germanic horsemen renowned for ferocity, to counterattack. The clashes are brutal, swirling fights of dust and steel in the valley floor. The Gauls retreat. The Romans keep digging. The ring closes. Now the siege begins in earnest, and the true enemy of Alesia is not the sword. It is the stomach. Inside the oppidum, the population is not just warriors. It includes non-combatants, families, the mandubii who live there, and refugees who fled to the fortress for safety. Every mouth consumes the same limited stores. Grain is measured, meat is rationed. The horses, once symbols of status and power, become food. Vercingetorix makes hard choices. He sends out his cavalry before the siege fully tightens, ordering them to slip through Roman lines and ride across Gaul, calling every tribe to arms. Bring a relief army, bring everything. This is the last stand. If Alesia falls, the rebellion dies with it. The cavalry breaks out in a storm of hooves and shouting. Some are cut down, many escape. They vanish into the countryside like sparks carried by wind. Now Vercingetorix must hold. Caesar, meanwhile, transforms the landscape into a killing field. The Roman lines are not just walls. In front of them lie trenches, some filled with water where possible, others dug deep to break formations. There are pits concealed with brush, each hiding a sharpened stake. A man who steps wrong is impaled, pinned in place, screaming as the battle moves past him. There are rows of iron hooks and barbs designed to tear flesh and snag feet. There are sharpened branches set like teeth in the ground. The Romans name these devices with a casual practicality of soldiers. They do not see cruelty, they see efficiency. Alesia becomes a place where the earth itself is weaponized. And still, the Gauls wait for salvation. Days pass, then weeks. The food shrinks. The air inside the fortress grows tense with hunger and fear. Warriors who once boasted of glory now count kernels of grain. Mothers hush children whose cries sound too much like weakness. The chiefs argue. Some want to attempt a mass breakout, others insist they must hold until the relief army arrives. Vercingetorix knows the truth. A breakout without coordination is suicide, but waiting too long is also death. Then comes the most haunting moment of the siege. The Mandubi, the local people, are running out of food. They are not all warriors, they are families. They're the ones who will die first. Vercingetorix and the chiefs make a decision that reveals the cruelty of siege warfare in its purest form. They drive the non-combatants out of Alesia. Men, women, children, the elderly, forced through the gates and down the slopes toward the Roman lines. They carry what little they can. They plead, they beg, they stumble into the open ground between two armies. And Caesar refuses to let them pass. He will not feed them. He will not allow them through his fortifications. He will not weaken his siege by opening gates for a flood of desperate people. The Mandubi are trapped in no man's land, starving in sight of their own walls, dying between the mercy of neither side. It is a scene that strips away any romantic illusion about ancient war. Inside, the Gauls watch their own people die outside the gates. Outside, Roman soldiers stand behind their works, listening to the cries, tightening their grip on spears and discipline. In that moment, Alesia is not just a battle, it is a test of endurance and ruthlessness. And then, at last, the horizon darkens with movement. The relief army comes. It is enormous, drawn from tribes across Gaul. Tens of thousands, perhaps more. Warriors with different shields, different war cries, different gods, united by desperation. If Alesia falls, Rome will crush them one by one. If they can break Caesar's lines, they can save Vercingetorix and reignite the rebellion. They arrive and see the impossible. Roman fortifications stretching for miles, like a serpent of wood and earth coiled around the hill. And beyond that, another serpent facing outward. Caesar has built a fortress in enemy territory, and now he stands inside it, outnumbered, waiting. This is the moment his gamble becomes clear. The double-wall trap is not just defense, it is control. It forces the Gauls to fight on Roman terms. It denies them open maneuver. It channels their attacks into narrow points where Roman discipline and fortifications multiply their strength. But numbers still matter, courage still matters, and the Gauls have both. The first assaults come like thunder. From outside, the relief army surges toward the contravallation, testing for weakness. They rush the trenches, hurl javelins, loose arrows, and try to tear down palisades with hooks and brute force. Roman archers answer. Sling stones crack skulls. Pilum javelins punch through shields and pin arms to wood. Gaulish warriors, some in mail shirts, others in leather and linen, throw themselves forward with a ferocity born of hunger and hope. They are not cowards. They are fighting for their world. And still the walls hold. The relief army pulls back, bloodied, and prepares for a greater blow. They scout the Roman lines, searching for ground that favors them. They find a section where the terrain makes the fortifications less complete, a slope where the earthworks are harder to anchor. They decide this is where Caesar will break. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix sees the signal fires and understands. The next attack will be the one that decides everything. He gathers his warriors. He speaks to them not as a king, but as a man who has staked his life on their unity. He promises that if they break the Roman lines even once, the siege will collapse. The relief army will pour through. Caesar will be trapped between two Gaulish forces in the open. Rome will bleed. Outside, the relief commanders rally their men. They bring ladders, they bring bundles of brush and earth to fill trenches. They bring everything they need to overwhelm fortifications with sheer mass. Caesar, in his camp, does not sleep. He walks the lines. He speaks to centurions, the hard men who hold Roman discipline together. He knows his soldiers are exhausted. They have been building for weeks, fighting for days, and now they must survive the largest coordinated assault of the war. He also knows something else. If he wins here, Gaul is finished. The final assault begins before dawn, when the air is cold and breath hangs like smoke. From outside, the relief army moves in a vast wave. They descend into trenches, throwing in brush, bodies, anything to make a crossing. They raise ladders against the palisade. They claw upward under a storm of missiles. Roman defenders push them back with spears and swords, but the pressure is relentless. At the same time, from inside Alesia, Vercingetorix launches his breakout. Thousands pour out, charging the inward wall. They carry hooks, ladders, and raw fury. They scream, they strike, they try to force the Romans to split their attention until the line snaps. For Caesar's men, it is the nightmare scenario made real. A Roman soldier on the rampart cannot turn his back. If he faces outward, a Gaul from inside may climb the wall behind him. If he faces inward, the relief army may breach from the valley. The air is filled with arrows, stones, and the metallic clatter of weapons. The ground is slippery with blood and churned mud. This is where Roman training becomes a kind of armor. Centurions shout orders, units rotate, exhausted men pulled back as fresh men step forward, shields lock, spears thrust in unison. The legion is not a mob of heroes, but a machine of coordinated violence. And yet, even machines can break. At the weak point, the relief army pushes hard. Ladders rise, warriors crest the palisade. For a moment, the Roman line wavers. Men fall from the rampart. A tower is swarmed. The sound changes. It becomes closer, sharper, the sound of enemies inside the defenses. Caesar receives the report and knows he cannot simply reinforce and hype. He must strike. He gathers reserves. He sends Labienus, his most trusted lieutenant, to hold the threatened sector. He orders cohorts to move at speed along the interior lines, using the fortifications like roads. Roman engineering now becomes Roman mobility. But the pressure keeps building. The Gauls outside are not just attacking, they are coordinating, they are exploiting the terrain, they are learning. And inside Alesia, Vercingetorix's men fight like those who have nothing left to lose. At the crisis point, Caesar does something that reveals why his name will echo through history. He goes to the front. Not as a distant commander behind tents, but as a general who understands morale as a weapon. He wears a distinctive cloak so his men can see him. He rides to where the fighting is thickest, where the line is bending, where the enemy believes victory is one more push away. Roman soldiers see him and stiffen, not because they love him like a myth, but because they know what his presence means. If Caesar is here, this point must not fall. If Caesar is here, reinforcements are coming. If Caesar is here, Rome is watching. He commits his last reserves, and then he orders the move that turns defense into annihilation. A cavalry strike. Germanic horsemen and Roman cavalry surge out, not against the wall, but around the battlefield's edge, seeking the flank and rear of the relief army. It is a risky maneuver in a crowded fight, but Caesar understands the psychology of massed warriors. If the relief army believes it is surrounded, its courage will fracture. The cavalry hits like a hammer. Gaulish warriors outside, focused on climbing and pushing, suddenly hear screams behind them. They turn and see riders cutting into their ranks, spears thrusting, swords flashing. Panic ripples. The formation loosens. Men begin to pull back, not because they are weak, but because the human mind cannot fight forward when death is coming from behind. At the same time, Roman infantry surges from the ramparts, pressing outward at the breach. Shields slam, swords stab. The Romans push the attackers back into the trenches where footing is bad and bodies pile up. The relief army's assault collapses into chaos. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watches from the heights as the moment of salvation slips away. His breakout force, still hammering the inward wall, begins to falter as they realize the outside attack is failing. Hope, the most powerful fuel in war, drains out of them like blood from a wound. The relief army retreats. Not in orderly ranks, but in scattered groups, fleeing across the valleys. Some are pursued and cut down. Others vanish into the countryside, their grand coalition dissolving as quickly as it formed. The tribes will blame each other. They will argue about courage and command. They will carry home the bitter taste of almost. Inside Alesia, silence spreads. There is no more food, no more cavalry, no more relief, no more miracles. Vercingetorix gathers the chiefs. He does not beg, he does not rage, he does not pretend. He tells them the war is lost, and that further resistance will only slaughter their people. He offers himself. He will surrender if it saves the rest. The next day, the gates of Alesia open. A warrior emerges not as a broken man, but as the embodiment of Gaul's last defiance. Vercingetorix, the unifier, the strategist, the symbol. He rides out and approaches Caesar. The details of the moment have been told and retold, shaped into legend. But the truth underneath the legend is simple and brutal. One side has no more options. Vercingetorix gives himself to Caesar. The siege ends, and with it the great rebellion. Caesar takes prisoners by the tens of thousands. Many are sold into slavery. The wealth of Gaul flows into Roman hands. The tribes that once dreamed of freedom now negotiate survival. And Caesar, victorious beyond expectation, returns to the Roman world with something more valuable than gold. He returns with prestige. Alesia is not just a military victory, it is a political weapon. It proves Caesar can win against impossible odds. It proves he can command loyalty, build wonders, and crush rebellion. It strengthens him for the coming storm, because the war in Gaul is only one chapter in his rise. Soon he will turn his eyes toward Rome itself. And what of Gaul? Alesia becomes a scar across its memory. The defeat does not erase Gaulish identity, but it changes its future. Roman roads will cut through forests. Roman law will reshape tribes. Latin will mingle with native tongues. Cities will rise where hill forts once stood. The world Vercingetorix fought for will not vanish overnight, but it will be absorbed, transformed, and bound into an empire. Yet Alesia endures as a lesson written in earth and blood. It shows how warfare is not only about bravery, but about structure. Not only about the charge, but about the trench. Not only about the hero, but about the supply line. The Gauls fought with passion and numbers, with a leader who understood strategy more than his enemies expected. But Caesar fought with something colder and often more decisive: control of the battlefield. He turned a hill into a prison. He turned dirt into a fortress. He turned two walls into a trap that could hold an army inside and another army outside, while his own men stood in the middle and survived. And in the end, the most terrifying weapon at Alesia was not the Roman sword. It was the Roman ability to make war inevitable. Because once Caesar's double walls rose from the ground, the battle was no longer a question of who was braver. It became a question of who could endure hunger, fear, and exhaustion longer, and who could keep obeying orders when every instinct screamed to run. So when you think of Alesia, don't just picture a siege. Picture a world closing in. Picture the sound of shovels biting into soil day after day as hope shrinks behind rising ramparts. Picture warriors staring down at the enemy and realizing the enemy is not coming up to fight them. The enemy is building. And then ask yourself what it must have felt like in those final hours for a Gaulish fighter on the wall to see the relief army break and scatter, to feel the last thread of hope snap, and to understand that the greatest trap in the ancient world was not made of iron, it was made of earth. Alesia is where Gaul's rebellion died and where Caesar's legend became unstoppable. A victory forged by engineering, sealed by discipline, and paid for in human suffering so vast that even now, more than 2,000 years later, it still feels like you can hear it in the wind over that hilltop. If you liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe button for more.